spoilerios about spoilerios. Let's roll.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Evolution of the Arm. I'm Sean Baker. So it's Sunday night, and 15 just aired, and I'm as happy as I have been for the last 3 months. This was again my favorite episode if you take 8 out of the equation, which is 8 is just going to be its own thing. So let's just say it's my favorite episode. This episode really felt like it was out to not only speak directly for the fans, but to answer questions like boom, boom, boom. So this is great. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that we don't have answered, and there's still a lot of stuff we're not going to get answers for, I'm convinced. But this really, helped us along. So we start with Nadine, and she's shoveling her way out of the shit, and we get kind of, a 27-year resolution to the Ed, Nadine, Norma love triangle. Nadine sets Ed free. He goes to Norma. It looks like she's going to reject him. Instead, she goes for him. And it's I love the use of the live Otis Redding song and the way it kind of fades out when Ed is, feeling like he's been rejected, and then it comes back in. And there's this beautiful moment where Shelley sees Ed propose, and Norma says yes, and they're happy. And I really wonder if Ed is not going to die in the coming melee, so we'll see. Now we're going to get into the mythology aspect, and the scene that transitions us from the double R to Bad Coop is this dark shot of electrical wires going along the side of a road, and it's something Andy saw in the skylight in the place with the firemen last episode. And then we go from those electrical wires to a winding, headlights on a dark road, very Lost Highway. Reminds us exactly of when we first met Bad Coop in the first episode of this season. And he goes to the convenience store. It's a real place, so to speak. I'm assuming this is the Dutchman that they were talking about. I don't know how that name figures into it. And he pulls up, and there's a woodsman, and he brings him in. He says, I want to see Phillip Jeffries. They walk upstairs, and somebody pointed out, there is no upstairs to the convenience store, but it's theoretical, I guess. They pass beneath an electrical lamp as they go up the stairs on the side of the convenience store, and they kind of fade in and out, and then they're in this place that we recognize as the place that we see in Fire Walk With Me. So in Fire Walk With Me, the scene with the Black Lodge meeting, Mrs. Chalfont gives Laura this painting, and it's of that wallpaper in this, I'm assuming this is the Black Lodge now. So we see the wallpaper, it's an identifier. He goes and he sees another woodsman sitting by this TV. We saw this in Fire Walk With Me. It's not exactly the same, but pretty much. He says, I want to speak to Phillip Jeffries. The woodsman fires up the TV or whatever it is. We see the jumping man finally. We knew he was going to appear. Have no idea what his role is still. We probably will not when this is all said and done, but it was cool to see that character again. And they walk further, the woodsman leading Bad Coop, and you can see how the building kind of phases in and out of being there, and not like they're walking through a darkened room, and then there's trees, so it's the woods, and they emerge into this courtyard of this motel. And it kind of looked like where my friends and I stayed in North Bend for the fest. I don't think it was the same thing. It may have actually been the one that Leland and Teresa Banks were at. Seedy. And, with this shot, I've thought of this before, but it just kind of re-triggered this in my head, the idea that Lynch endows locations and settings with character. Like, this is already, just seeing it once, and then at the end of the episodes during the credit, this is now an iconic thing. Like, people will seek this out, whatever it is. He's got such an eye for places that have as much character as people. This strange woman comes out. She's got the backwards lodge speak thing going on. She says, I'll unlock the door for you. He goes in, and we get Phillip Jeffries, and there was some conjecture that Bowie had actually shot some scenes for this before he passed away, and clearly he didn't. And so leave it to Lynch to, instead of, there was at some point a talk about recasting, never going to happen. So he replaces the actual physical person of Phillip Jeffries with, I don't know, is it like an iron lung? I don't really know what that thing was. It was so strange and very early David Lynch, very industrial. If you've seen any of his books of photography, he's got a thing for that kind of old U.S. industrial landscape, and so this is very much of that time and era. And Bad Coop seems to function as us, the audience, and he says, he's asking Phillip about Judy, Who was Judy, he says, very pointedly. We get the flashback to the Fire Walk With Me scene again. And it's interesting. Phillip says, we used to talk. You see the whole thing where, Fire Walk With Me, he says, I'm not going to talk about Judy. And then it cuts back, and Bad Coop says, yes, 1989, you came to the Philadelphia offices. And then Jeffries says, so you are Cooper. Made me think, what if we've got it all wrong and this is Cooper? Now, I don't think that's the case, but what I do think is the case is that what he's saying is, and this goes to that Fire Walk With Me scene where there's the two Coopers when he's standing in the camera, maybe this is more Cooper's nature all along. Maybe this is the real Cooper. So not to say that the Cooper we're seeing that's stuck in Dougie's, domestic limbo isn't the real Cooper that we know. The doppelganger was split off from the original. And maybe Bad Coop was more of what Cooper was before than we knew. I mean, we've talked about it before. He slept with Wyndham Earle's wife. He almost slept with Audrey. He violated his code of ethics to go across the border. Now, all of these things were for altruistic reasons, or, well, not Wyndham Earle's wife, and he even says it himself in the original series, like, I did what I had to do, like, in the name of what I thought was right, and it's hurt people. But there's other things, we don't know Cooper as well as we think we know him, and so maybe this is what that's saying. It's interesting, considering that it looks later on like we may finally get something that brings Cooper back, where he sticks the fork in a light socket. That's all I'll say about that. I love the fact that they left us hanging there. It was cool that Sunset Boulevard triggered it. To go back to the Iron Lung, the Phillip Jeffries, when they're talking about Judy, he says, let me spell it out for you, and some numbers emerge. It looks like this matches up with the coordinates that we saw on Ruth Davenport's arm. We get Cooper coming out of there via the telephone, so it's like that electrical line kind of transition again, where he goes from being in this place that's kind of more theoretical to being back in our realm via the telephone lines. And then there's Richard Horne pointing a gun at him, and we get the revelation that yes, Audrey is his mother. I can't wait to see what happens with that conversation in the truck, if we get to see it. Then we go to Stephen and Gerstine Hayward in the woods. Let's just hope he shot himself. I kind of think he didn't, but let's hope he did. Nice cameo by Mark Frost as the guy walking his dog. I forget what the name was in the credits. This episode, more than any other, as we're getting more and more Twin Peaks as we go on further into this, and we're spending more time in the town, the woods are more present than ever. There's a lot of shots of the woods and the trees, and they have a presence. Again, with this, Lynch giving a personality or iconic characteristics to a place. So we have a lot of the woods. We go to the Roadhouse, and the MC, I don't know what's going on. It's set up for a band. They're playing ZZ Top. Great song. The volume meter, so strange. But then we get James and Freddie. And so this is apparently directly after what we saw last week. So I guess nothing came of that whole thing in the furnace room, which, adds credence to the fact that when I brought this up last time, a couple people pointed out that Ben and Beverly, when they were listening to the sound and trying to figure out where it was, Ben had said something like, oh, maintenance checked it out and it was inconclusive. So maybe he was referring to James going in there. A little disappointed we didn't see more of that, but something's probably coming. Probably. So James ends up getting his ass kicked, and then Freddie steps in and hits these guys with the pile driver glove. And he hits them so hard that the music skips. So I thought that was hysterical. They end up in jail with Nato and Billy. Notice when they bring James and Freddie in, it's Bobby and Hawk bringing them in, and you hear one of them say, put him in number 8. And number 8 was also the room that Phillip Jeffries was in. I don't know if that means anything or not. So we get some more of this, the drunk imitating everybody. Doesn't really go anywhere yet. We'll see. We go to Vegas again with the FBI, the local FBI office. This Headley guy who's just nuts. And they've brought in the wrong Dougie Jones and his screaming family. It was kind of comical. Also in Vegas, we get Duncan Todd and his protege or his minion Roger, and they both get capped by Chantel. And then we get a great scene of Chantel and Hutch eating fast food in the truck, talking about the total hypocritical nature of America and thou shalt not kill and all this. So then, beautiful send-off for Margaret Lanterman, the log lady, and Catherine Coulson, the actress who portrayed her, longtime Lynch actress. And I mean, this is the death of an icon, and it really hit me. She calls Hawk. We've seen this happen a couple times this season, where she calls him and gives him these cryptic messages or seeks some kind of solace with him as she's dying. And so this time she calls and says, I'm dying. He says, I'm sorry. Because he knows the cycle of life, and she knows that he knows that. So she's not looking for him to tell her anything. She's just looking to kind of talk to him, and she's looking to remind him. She says, remember what I told you about the one, and then something about under the moon. And I'm assuming she's referring to the whole Laura is the one. We don't know how this is going to play out yet, but it's a beautiful scene, very touching. And it goes directly to Sheriff Frank Truman looking at pictures of, it looked like fish, prize-winning fish on the internet, and then Bobby and Andy and Lucy come in and say, oh, Hawk told us, intercomed us to meet him here. And he emerges from the shadows and says, Margaret Lanterman passed away. And Lucy kind of sheds a tear, and it's a sad music swells. It's a very iconic moment, and rightfully so. I thought it was beautiful, and the episode was dedicated, I thought it was really cool, to Margaret Lanterman, because one of the first, if not the first episode of the season was dedicated to Catherine Coulson, the actress. So I thought that was really cool. Then we get more of Audrey and Charlie. I don't really want to talk about this right now. I think in the end, whatever happens, it's going to be like, oh yeah, it makes sense. It's just right now, clearly, maybe we're all wrong, but I think everybody's on the same page at this point that this is a psychiatrist and he's helping her through that. Either that or Kirsten has the idea she's still in a coma. I like that idea. I don't know if I think that's what it is. I would almost prefer it to the psychiatrist, but whatever it is, I'm not loving it right now, so whatever. And we get this great scene at the Roadhouse with this girl sitting, these two guys pick her up, set her on the floor, and she starts crawling through the crowd. I talked last week about really loving the Lissy performance. The Vale's performance killed. I mean, I downloaded the record right after. So good. The juxtaposition of this girl crawling along the floor and then starting to shriek as the singer is screaming as the performance is culminating. It was just really great. And man, guys, we've got 3 episodes left and 2 weeks left, and last week was amazing. This week was even better. I think we're just going to keep climbing a ladder, and I'm so excited about it. So until next week, I'll see you in the trees.